The big confusion here is that this is all about the virus. People are asking me, oh, Harry, yeah, you have 40% crash. Yeah, we're having that, but that's the virus. No, you have to see here, the virus is a trigger, like the subprime crisis. Remember that? It was building in bad loans. It was only 14% of consumer credit in the U.S. It was only 4 states it was concentrated in. And yet it caused a whole global downturn in stocks and recession and everything. This is not just a trigger, but it is the perfect trigger because money printing does nothing to stop the spread of this virus. Like everything, it can help cushion the economy, although we see that's happening less and less. We have to print more and more to have less and less effect. And I'm going to get to the most important point a little later this morning. As the markets do a perfect, what I call, fourth wave bounce after that really nasty third wave crash, which should be the worst we see regardless. And we should be ready. We should have, be heading down to retest those lows on March 23rd, or more likely to make a new low. The markets came back. What is happening here, and what is the threat? It's not the recession. It's not the virus. It's the greatest debt. And more important, financial asset bubble in history, because we already had the greatest into 2007 as we predicted, and when the GFC or the Great Recession hit, central banks did something unique. They decided to print unlimited amounts of money to stop the deleveraging process, the very process that makes the economy healthy by eliminating bad zombie banks, eliminating unproductive debt, eliminating unproductive companies and even unproductive workers, or switching people from unproductive industries to productive ones. This is how we get healthy, by little recessions along the way. And when we don't have enough of those, which the central banks always stops, like they did from 1913 to 1929, no accident. They get created in 1913, and we have the greatest bubble in history up to that point, and then the greatest depression, which is a deleveraging or detox, I always like to call it in health terms. Getting rid of bad stuff, which is painful. There is no beautiful deleveraging. That's Ray Dalio. There are better ways to do it, but there's no beautiful deleveraging in this situation. It is painful by nature. So here's what's happened. Normally, of course, debt would deleverage, and we've got tons of debt in the world. 80, 90 trillion more than we had at the top in 2007 before the Great Recession. But that's not the big problem here. That's not the big hurdle for central banks in the world to get over. We now have 330 trillion approximately of financial assets, which includes loans, stock, bonds, loans largely, and other financial assets. 330 trillion. That is 4 times global GDP in the U.S. My other important number, about 125 trillion. 6 times our GDP, since our stock market is so highly valued and so large in the world. That's the problem for central banks here. They created this monster by not just trying to lower interest rates to get banks to loan more, which creates more consumer and business spending and investment and consumer inflation. No, that didn't work. They could see that wasn't going to work in 2009, so they ended up going to QE, which means you just directly push money into the financial asset pool of stocks, real estate, commodities, mortgages, loans, all this stock, bonds. And so we have the greatest financial asset. 330 trillion. When people have told me, 2 things people have told me constantly against what I've been saying. First of all, Harry, central banks will never let that first 40% crash happen. They will be ahead. No, it's happening. It's happening. It's happening. Near term. This is so big. A mountain of assets deleveraging. Stocks globally in just a couple of weeks. 15 to 20 trillion disappeared. That's just the appetizer. Not even that. Hasn't even hit real estate yet. And bonds and a lot of other assets, although it is starting to hit corporate bonds and junk bonds. So that's the bugaboo here. By avoiding this healthy painful deleveraging, which has always happened in recessions and happened in spades in the Great Depression. How do you think we came out of the Great Depression so dramatically instead of so weakly this time? And another one of my favorite graphs, when I look at real GDP cumulative from the top in 29 to the top in 2007 into today, we are lower cumulative. Yes, much bigger crash in 29 to 32, 33, but much more forceful recovery. Add it all up, we are not as good as we were at the end of that depression. And we've yet to see the worst of it because we pushed it off. Pushing off a crisis only makes it worse. You don't get something for nothing. People also say, Harry, central banks will just print ever more money. And of course they will. Zero rates and unlimited money printing right at the beginning of this crisis. You know why? They're that scared of the economy because they know better than anybody. They've been stimulating beyond anything they could have imagined or anybody could have imagined back in 2008 and 9. And you can't get this damn economy to grow much more than 2% or 1.5% in Europe or 1% in Japan. What does that tell you? What does 30 years of a winter season and no spring, no rebound in real estate in Japan, stocks only going about halfway back and ready to fall again? What does it tell you? This does not work. And why can't the central banks print unlimited amount of money? Because we have an unlimited amount of financial assets, which do what? Bubbles only burst. By creating this great bubble, they have created something that deleverages faster than debt does in a downturn. And banks writing off loans and restructuring loans. That takes a while. Financial assets can go boom like we just saw. So, what the battle's going to be from here on out, off and on. But then there'll be a rebound. One, now that the virus is danger looks increasingly over, if it doesn't erupt somewhere else, as I said, in the third world, we're going to have a rebound with all this stimulus and people saying, oh, thinking like I said at the beginning, oh, this was just the virus. Now it's back to normal. Let me tell you something. I went through the freaking hurricane in Puerto Rico. That's more like the virus. It's a short-term event. It's a shock. It threw Puerto Rico into a sudden depression. Everything stopped. I had to move. My wife and I had to move to New York for 3 months because it was totally dysfunctional, and we came back. It was not a V-shaped recovery. It was very huge. A lot of businesses went under, never came back because they were weak or too much in debt. A lot of restaurants gave it up, just took the insurance and ran. I had 7 great restaurants within a block and a half of me, and only one of them's left. Of 21 total restaurants, including the crappy ones, over a third of them are gone, never came back. So, the bigger picture here is the most over-indebted, greatest financial asset bubble-driven economy, a totally artificial bubble for the first time fully in history to go to new high, created totally by trillions and trillions, about $20 trillion being put into financial market, not into the banking system, not given to consumers like they're just starting to do now. It just created a financial asset bubble. It has nothing to do with Wall Street, so that financial bubble can burst dramatically, and it will. What does history say the stocks will do? Down 80, 90%. I'm talking blue chip already. In this first crash, we've seen the S&P down 35% at worst, the Russell 2000 small caps 44%, and still the leaders, the NASDAQ, the tech stocks, down 32%. One more whack and then we're clearly into this 40% plus, but we've already had enough of a first crash, even if that was it. So, what's the next story? We get this rebound, 3 to 5 months historically. It could be a little longer because of the election in the U.S. and Trump's going to pull out all stops fiscally, which they've already started to do as well. By the way, $6 trillion when you add up all the fiscal stimulus, loans to businesses and checks to consumers and all this sort of stuff. And we've been running a $1 trillion or 6% of GDP, 6% a year of our GDP is stimulus, and we're still growing at 2.5% at best. What the hell does that tell you? We have a dead economy. That's the real story. This economy's dead, overstimulated, overmanipulated, overstretched. And you know what type of correction we had in the stock market with the worst virus in all of modern history, not the Black Plague in the Dark Ages, Renaissance. The Spanish flu killed 50 million guests because they didn't have good figures. 5 million infected at least. You know how much the stock market went down at the worst when that flu was at its worst in 1918? 10%. Because it wasn't overvalued, because we were in World War I. And in reality, factories were not shutting down at the speed of light like this because people had to produce for the war. It is this bubble that makes the economy, and this endless debt bubble and financial asset bubble, these twin bubbles, especially financial asset, that puts this economy so vulnerable that this is the perfect trigger, and we do not come back from this. That's what I'm telling you. Do not think it's over, because the virus is receding. And second of all, it could come back in the winter, like the Spanish flu did, bigger than ever. May or may not. I think we're more prepared this time, and I think it's more likely to come back in emerging countries or maybe even spread near them. But the point is, see the big picture here. The real story here is the greatest debt and financial asset bubble in